Okay, so we are in September, and it is a very interesting part of the year because we're actually moving right along into fall. But in Southern California, particularly zone 9 and 10, it can be one of the hottest times of the year. In fact, it's been pretty nice this whole summer. This weekend out at the farm, it's gonna be like 110. I'm not exaggerating. So it's a hard time to know what to plant in our zones because even though we're moving into fall, the weather can be extremely hot. Well, I've got all the information you need to know to be very successful at growing in zone 9 and 10, and particularly getting a head start on your fall seed crops so that you really can maximize our very short cool season. So in this video, you're gonna find out exactly what I start in September in zone 9 and 10. But before I get into that, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button so you're notified anytime we put out a video. Okay, so let's get into it. So, as I mentioned, it's hot, but we're going into fall. It's a very confusing time of year. You really feel like you want to plant more tomatoes, but is that the right thing to do? Probably not. One important thing that you have to remember as a gardener in our particular area is that it's not just about temperature. It is also about the hours of sunlight that a plant receives. Now, our days are getting shorter and they're going to continue to get shorter. And there are plants that enjoy those waning hours of sunlight for their production, particularly of what we're going to eat from them. So you got to keep that in mind. Another very important factor of planting in the fall is something called the fall effect. And basically what it means is if you're a brand new gardener and you wait until things are basically so cool, the weather is cool and we get rainy weather, you're almost going to miss your window to plant because the days will be so short, your plants will be stagnant, they won't really do a whole lot. So as a more professional grower or a grower that really wants to get the most out of your cool season, you're gonna start a lot of crops now so that they can take advantage of the long hours of sunlight, grow and get really big and robust by the time it is cool, and then hopefully we get some rain, right? So some of your things like cauliflower, okay? So cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage, it takes a long time to grow. And so by starting it now in September, you're gonna ensure that you can get it up to a size that you can plant it out in the garden and it can take advantage of the long hours of sunlight and really get big before the days get so short that it doesn't really wanna do anything. Another reason why planting these crops now is going to be really helpful is because you're gonna have a lot of produce to eat during a time of year where you really can use it, and that's around the holidays. So Thanksgiving, Christmas, all the family that comes into town, you can make amazing recipes and dishes with all the broccoli, cabbage, and cauliflower you have, versus if you wait till November to plant it or December, then you're gonna be eating all that in the spring when you already have a lot of other produce in the garden. So it's another reason why planting it now is a really good idea. Think of broccoli, cabbage, and cauliflower as being very similar to tomatoes and eggplants and peppers in that you typically start them in a tray early in the season, get them up to the size that you want them to be, and then you plant them out. That's really important. Now, sorry, totally distracting. So broccoli, cabbage, and cauliflower is something that you want to start early, get it up to the size, and then plant it out. It is not typically something that you're going to plant directly into the soil because the seeds are small. Oftentimes, little roly-polies and things can come chew them down, so you want to start them early in trays. Now, those are not the only things that I'm going to be starting right now. In fact, even though a lot of things in my garden are still producing, I've got tomatoes, I've got eggplants, I have so many warm season crops that are pumping out produce, they are getting to the end of their lifespan, and I'm also tired of eating them. I want to switch over to cool season crops, take advantage of the shorter days, and get some new vegetables in my kitchen to enjoy. So all the crops that you start in the fall are collectively called cool season crops. If you've watched my other videos, you've taken my courses, or been to any of our classes, you know that I use that term over and over again. And cool season crops refers to plants that like to grow during a cool time of year, and also during the time of the year when the days are shorter. That's key, because as you know, September and October in Southern California can be some of our hottest months. So can be a little bit confusing. So as I mentioned, broccoli, cabbage, and cauliflower, they're similar to tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers in that you want to start them early in seed trays, get them up to a size that they're healthy and robust, and plant them out into the garden. Because of that, they take a few extra weeks of prep time. So if we start them now in September, we're going to be way ahead of the game. Let's say it takes us 4 weeks to get them up to size to plant out. That means we're really not even planting them out until October. We're going to be right on time. We're not going to be late, which is really important. Greens, when I mean greens, I mean all greens. So dark leafy greens, kale, collards, arugula, all of your lettuces, all of the greens that you eat, that you either cook or put in your salad, that's collectively what I mean by greens. There are greens that are a lot more heat tolerant than others, and we actually have on our website a collection of those greens. Some of the greens that I really love that do super well are things like Ethiopian kale. Now, this kale variety does really well in the heat. So if you want something to plant now and you're worried about how hot it is and you're not going to use shade cloth, or you just want it to really thrive in your hot environment, this is a variety that does really well. Also, if you're planting leafy greens, varieties like Paris Island or romaine lettuces or iceberg lettuces tend to hold up a lot better in the heat than leafy green mixes like Meslin mix or varieties like that. So that's something to keep in mind. There is slight differences between varieties of what does well in the hot fall and what doesn't do as well. So now, because I want leafy greens now and I know we're heading into some hot weather, I'm gonna focus on varieties that do really well in the heat. So things like my Paris Island cause or any of my iceberg lettuces. I'm gonna focus on mustard greens that do really well. Collard greens do really well in the heat. Ethiopian kale. I'm going to start those first, and then as things cool off, I can focus on other varieties that are a little more heat sensitive. So that's a good goal when you are starting seeds in the fall for zone 9 and 10. Start with varieties that can take the brunt of the heat first, because you know that eventually we're going to cool off. So that's really important. So greens, now root crops. Root crops collectively refers to anything that grows in the soil and you eat the root. So those are things like carrots, beets, radishes, turnips, rutabagas. All of those root crops that grow in the soil we collectively call them root crops, basically. All of those you can start now. Now, think about how warm it is in the soil versus how warm it is in the ambient temperature. If you're doing things like using tons of compost and mulch, watering heavily, you're going to notice that the soil temperature is much cooler than the ambient temperature outside, and that's what allows for root crops to grow during this very warm part of the year. Next, we have herbs, things like fennel, marjoram, catnip. A lot of your herb varieties you want to start now so that they can grow all winter long, and you'll actually notice that they'll flower in the spring. So those are good root crops to start. Oh, sorry, I said root crops. Those are good herbs to start now. Next, we have things like peas. So peas are a very commonly misunderstood crop. Guys, be nice. Be nice. Because people mix them up with beans. Peas and beans are not the same crop. Peas grow during the cool season. They are sensitive to heat. Beans grow during the warm season. If you're a brand new gardener, that's a very easy thing to mix up because they seem kind of similar. Now, I'm going to start these probably in the next couple weeks after I get all this other goodies started. And that's because peas are sensitive to heat, and when they're really heat stressed, you'll notice things like aphids will totally attack them. They know that peas are stressing, and they'll come and you'll see ants and aphids, and they'll really attack the plant. I always shade cloth my peas when I start them in the fall until we move into cool season. That's going to make a very big difference. Until that cool weather arrives, I want to baby these crops so that they can survive and then thrive when the cool season comes. So that's the next one. Lastly, we have onions. So I'm actually going to start with very quick, easy to grow bunching onions, or sometimes they're called green onions or scallions. So I'm going to start these in September because I want them to be ready in 8 to 10 weeks to enjoy in my kitchen, and they're also very easy to grow. I'm gonna get these started, get them out into the garden so I can make room for other onion varieties. I didn't bring it back, sorry. For other onion varieties like Gold Coin, Walla Walla, Red Burgundy, the bulbing onion varieties that take a little more work. These are gonna be the first ones that I start and get out of the way. Okay, so real quick, what am I starting in September? So I'm gonna start my broccoli, my cabbage, and my cauliflower. That's because I gotta start them from seed in trays. I gotta get them up to the size so they can plant out. They take a little bit extra work. I am gonna start my heat tolerant leafy greens, and that's because I want some salads. I want some delicious, yummy, dark leafy greens for my garden. I'm gonna start those as soon as possible. Root crops. I'm gonna start those because the days are getting shorter. I wanna take advantage of our longer growing days, and the soil temperature should be cooler than the ambient temperature if you're using things like compost mulch, lots and lots of mulch. You're watering deeply and you're really taking care of your soil. Herbs, I'm gonna start herbs because they're very slow to grow. I wanna get them up and growing so I can plant them out in my raised beds. Peas, I'll start those and baby them until it gets cooler. And onions, I'm gonna start my onions because also they're very slow to grow. Now, this is a whole method that I use for my fall seed starting, and I'm taking in account something called succession planting. If you follow me, you've watched our videos, you have attended our classes, you know we talk about succession planting all the time. The reason why I'm so passionate about it is it's a way in which you can actually really produce a lot of produce in your garden to enjoy all season long. And you can avoid the kind of feast and famine scenario that you have when you plant everything out at once. You'll notice in our calendar we actually have succession planting days here, so it actually tells you at what interval you're going to plant your crops, okay? So something like arugula you're gonna plant every 7 days. Now why is that? Because you want a fresh crop of arugula to be ready every 7 days. It's a very quick growing crop. And if you are thinking about potentially selling produce to neighbors or friends, or even just producing enough that you can share with multiple people, succession planting is key so that you constantly have a crop of goodies to harvest, to share, or sell to other people. That's really important. So by getting my fall crop started early, which is really right on time, in September, I'm gonna get these up and going into the garden, clear this space so that I can start crops all over again. I will be starting crops from seed basically from now until about December. Then I'll have a nice little break, and then we'll actually start talking about spring, and I'll be back to work all over again. So that's what I do to get my garden full of produce in the fall, specifically talking about September seed starting.